Good morning. So something I want to do is I want to start off this video by addressing yesterday's live stream. Um, Yesterday's live stream, I will have to admit, it was some very sloppy trading. And the reason I'm coming on here and saying that is because I feel like if anyone's watching these videos in hindsight, it would be good to go back and watch. It was October 18th PM session. I took 3 trades. To give you the backstory of those trades, I was dropping my girlfriend off somewhere, and I was driving home, and I was pulling into my driveway as the PM session started, and I just hopped on, and I didn't take a trade in the morning. And the past few days I've been kind of being a little selective, and I've been taking trades, and I just really wanted to take a trade, and I just hopped in and took like the first fair value gap. And I just want it to be, I could just delete it. I could just not even address it. But I think it's good to go and watch because it shows, something real. It shows that even doesn't matter how good you are, there are some people that won't have sloppy days, but in the beginning of this journey, for most people, you're going to have really sloppy days, and those are the days that you have to limit. So just thought I'd bring that up. Let's start off with the dollar. The dollar is, so we left this daily fair value gap the other day, and ICT called out on Twitter some buy side that he was correct about. We ended up taking. I'm interested to see how we treat the top of this fair value gap today. You can see on the daily, we just came in and touched the bottom of it. I want to see if we continue further into this range or if it holds off price. Here's the look of the 4 hour. So even on the 4 hour, we're in this fair value gap. So maybe at the open, I'll come back and look and see, are we coming down? Are we going to come down to the consequent encroachment of this wick? Is this fair value gap going to hold off price? The fact that we came down, just touched the top of this, if this 4 hour fair value gap holds off price to the upside, I will like that a lot. Going over to NASDAQ. NASDAQ this morning, I really liked the way NASDAQ looked in relation to ES. So much so I almost wanted to trade it instead. So here's our NASDAQ weekly chart. We've came back up and, no, sorry, this is the daily chart. So we came back up and we spent a few days in this weekly fair value gap. You can see on the weekly, they're pretty big wicks. We're having trouble closing the bodies inside. We're in the bottom quarter of this weekly fair value gap. So on the weekly time frame, this is looking like it wants to go down. On the daily time frame, you can see we came up and closed a bunch of bodies up, even closed a body up, even closed a body above it, came down. This up close candle held off price, came down, and then yesterday we left it. This morning, if you were on earlier, it was looking pretty bearish. When this was when price was all the way down at the bottom of this wick, that was a pretty big down close candle. And I'm noticing how we just came down and took that liquidity, this daily low right here. I think I mislabeled it. Let me fix this label. Oh no, I didn't mislabel it. It is a weekly low. So on the candle, on the weekly chart, this is a weekly low that we just kind of swept. It's also a daily low. But I like that because, resting below weekly and daily lows, especially weekly, that's a good sweep. There's a lot of liquidity. So watching how we react after we do that is really good. It's like a tipping of the hand. So as you can see, here's that low. This is that fair value gap ICT think a long time ago. There's a few videos called this out. I'm just gonna. So we came down, took that liquidity, dropped in here, and then this right here, this is a new day opening gap. So this is the difference in price between yesterday's close at, I believe it was yesterday's close and yesterday's like open. So if you look, it's the close around 4:30, and then when the market opens back up at 6, it's like new day opening gap, and it's when the market opens at 6, but it's the same day, but that's the new day opening gap. And at first, so you can see that it looks like a volume imbalance on the higher time frame. So that's on the 4-hour. It's on the 4-hour. On the 15-minute, you can see a little bit of a gap right there. That's it. Right there. So it's the difference in the price at 4:45, and then we open and start trading again at 6. Price came up and tapped it that night. Then we came down, and it was this morning during the London session. So important to note, during London, we swapped that liquidity, sent it higher, came back up, touched, came back up. Notice how we closed above it, this new day opening gap, closed above it, came back down, and then rallied back up. And I like this narrative on NQ because we took that weekly low, dropped into this fair value gap, came up, closed above this new day opening gap, and I like the way price is printing here on the 15-minute. If we go over to ES, we'll start again from the daily. ES is telling the same story, just not as clear. You know, here's the weekly. The weekly, we measured out this wick. Weekly candle closed, barely like in the bottom quarter of this wick. On the daily, we left this daily fair value gap pretty aggressively yesterday. I was really happy to see that. On the 4-hour, you can see this breaker structure, this high low, higher high. It's even better on the 1-hour. On the 1-hour, this is where I framed out this breaker, and I was using that for my narrative in the PM session yesterday, and as you can see, price treated it very well. All the bodies close in. We did have this wick come pretty high, but the breaker scathed off price. We broke lower. So similar to NQ, you know, we're making this low down here. I like NQ just because it's sweeping that weekly liquidity. You can see price on this order block right here. We closed perfectly. Our bodies are respecting the mean threshold of this order block. You know, usually when price, because NQ and ES, sometimes they don't line up perfectly with their PD arrays. But you can usually find one. So, for example, if NQ is sweeping daily and weekly liquidity on this candle, it might not be sweeping a daily or weekly liquidity for ES, but you can see we're respecting the mean threshold of this order block. So there's usually a PD array, and that makes me think that, you know, this low is significant. So on the 1-hour, we made that low. It's hard with all these new week opening gaps. What I started doing is I put the text facing the other side of it. So if this is the bottom of this new week opening gap, the text is on the inside. If this is the top of the new week opening gap, and I dated both of them. So you can, for a second I was going to say, oh, look at consequent encroachment, because I was looking at these two lines, but that new week opening gap is actually these. Anyways, we have a lot of them here. On the hourly, we came up, took out this high, took out that high, came down into this hourly for value gap. You can see on the hourly, this, when you go over to the 15-minute, this is the lower time frame inefficiency. We came down, the candle bodies respected it, and we came up. There's also a new day opening gap for ES. ES respected it a little better up until a few moments ago, you can see. So it formed here, came down. Yesterday we touched it, came down, came up. The body is respecting the consequent encroachment, came down, opened up today. We have London session low coming up. Mean threshold again, respecting the bodies right here. Came down, respected this BISI. And now I want to see how we open. It seems like we're respecting bullish PD arrays, but our higher time frame narrative is still bearish. Powell is speaking today at 12, so unless we see a really good setup, probably won't take a trade in the morning. He is speaking, I ended up looking it up. He is giving an economic outlook at Club of New York Luncheon. And I guess you can watch it live. But since he's speaking today, I'm expecting some manual intervention, price to behave not super well. It's a good thing it's at 12 because that leaves the PM session. I'm looking right now, and it looks like this website's interesting. It's like the news events at the federalreserve.gov calendar. So he's speaking at 12, and it looks like it doesn't go that long. He's done before too. So, okay, we came down. Looks like we tapped consequent encroachment of that BISI nicely. You can see that this 15-minute fair value gap is also a 5-minute fair value gap. I love when that happens. This is awesome to see because what you do is you get a lot more data, so you can go to the 5-minute and see all these candles just respecting it, and it's only two to three candles on the 15-minute, but you get all these 5-minute candles to kind of reinforce this idea. So I love seeing that. You can also see it on the 1-minute. $8.30. We had unemployment claims at 8:30. In terms of buy side, so I'm interested to see the open because we kind of there's not a lot of distinct buy side. So we have these highs that we're kind of sweeping above right now. Then the next thing above that is like these PD arrays for buy side liquidity, which are on the other side of that hourly breaker. I don't really want to try and trade anything to the upside through that breaker. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna watch and see how these highs form, because as you can see, we have this one, we have two. I want to see if we go for a third time, make somewhat of like a 3 drives pattern, and then displace lower. So if we go up, take this one more time and then displace lower, I'd like to see that. We have a opening range gap right there. Draw that on the 5 minute. Since the market already opened, I don't know if I want to go and yeah, I should go correct that on the 1 minute. Noticing how, so we have a little SMT divergence between NASDAQ and ES right now. NASDAQ's displacing lower. It looks like NASDAQ's taking out this low. ES hasn't taken it out yet. So I'll be watching this 15-minute for value gap. If that 15-minute candle closes below it, I think that'll lean well to our short narrative. But I also think these highs right here are just, they're too clean on ES. Look at that. Very clean highs. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't even know if the market can allow for 4 highs that close to each other. So we will see. So I feel like there's been a few times recently where for days our narrative has been, our daily narrative has been short because we've been waiting to leave this daily for value gap. And there's been a few days where I've taken some scalps to the upside. I think today is one of those days where I really actually am only looking for shorts because we have this breaker, this hourly breaker, and there's just not a whole lot of buy side that I think wants to be had. Slash even just setups that I would could see playing out right now. I do like this downside narrative. But we're having this, ES is having trouble getting below that low, whereas NASDAQ is completely falling off a cliff. I'm going to take this new day opening gap off because the opening range is encompassing it. Okay. ES is finally following suit with NASDAQ. If this high had taken that, if it had made one more higher high, I would have really liked to call out some downside. I think the fact that NQ did it is probably enough. Shows that it's kind of weird because if ES didn't make this higher high, ES in theory should be weaker. So why is it that NASDAQ ran a lot more aggressively below this low? Again, this is all stuff you want to keep in mind when you know there's like a high impact news event happening. So Powell is speaking at 12. Noticing how the 5-minute is kind of at least this candle respected this 15-minute fair value gap. Price is looking heavy. I'm gonna hold off on going short just yet because again we still haven't violated any bullish PD arrays, and we didn't get that this high above here. This will be interesting because it seems like NASDAQ is going to take these lows a lot sooner than ES's, and that would be a pretty big discrepancy. If the dollar dropping. Let's look at the 5-minute chart. Yeah, so the dollar's still making lower lows. So if the dollar's making lower lows, that's another red flag if we're going short. It's interesting. I have this buddy from this old trading group, and we follow each other on Instagram, and he doesn't trade anything ICT. I think it's like he does support and resistance, like supply and demand zones. He's a really good trader, low key guy. But he posted on Instagram today. He was like, "I will not be trading today." Just like he said, too many high impact news events, but there's only two. I think what it was for him was it was Powell speaking. But it's interesting how you might see like the reasons won't be the same. I mean, I don't know his reasons. I don't think he said that before the market even opened. But it seems like you'll see a consistency between high level traders, and the behavior might not be for the same reason, but like what they're doing is kind of the same. So like he's not trading today. Watching NASDAQ take these lows so early and have ES not take these lows, that's kind of making me not want to trade. That's just too big of a discrepancy between the markets. And again, we could, pull 5 handles out. You can get lucky and pull 5 handles out, but, reflecting back on yesterday's sloppy trading, I think it's like really important when you have days where you kind of have cracks in discipline to, be maybe over disciplined a little bit the following days. Because, if we have this environment that's kind of low probability, and why set yourself up for 2 losses in a row? And to kind of cycle back on yesterday's trading day, the interesting thing was I ended up taking a trade in the morning that wasn't on the YouTube channel. It was on a separate account. And I used more contracts, but I used 2 contracts for that, and it was in my trading journal right here. I feel like I was going to show it later, but I walked away with a 1K win in the morning, and then the loss in the afternoon wasn't even that big. It was just like really sloppy trading, and I was like really upset like the whole day, and I it took me a while, but I looked back on it and I was like, I had a green day. Like, why are you so like upset? And I think the reason why I was upset was because like the way I executed in that afternoon session on YouTube. Like again, we walked away with like 350 and a loss, which is like trading 1 contract is like a norm, like a decent size, like not, it's an expected size loss. It's not too big. But it was really just like my execution because I had the draw on liquidity right. And yeah, I think that's why I was beating myself up over it. And the fact that that big, like that good win was on my like other account, not, and it like wasn't shown on the YouTube channel. So that was a little bit of like a little bit of an ego hit. I was a little annoyed by that. But in my journal, I ended up talking about like, I just like reflected on it, and it's like, it's so interesting. Like that's what makes trading so hard is like at least for me personally, the losses bear so much more weight than the wins. Okay, so you can see on the 15-minute, we closed this candle below this 15-minute fair value gap, and then we had the next one open up and come up and touch the bottom of it. I like how the dollar, this yellow line, looks like it kind of wants to turn around a little bit. We had this sharp run below these lows, and now it's as a sharp reversal. So NASDAQ wicked. NASDAQ barely wicked below these lows and then turned around. Well, it hasn't turned around yet, but it's wicked below those lows. I'm watching here how in the 15-minute this candle came up and touched the bottom of this one, completely closing in any chance of a fair value gap. You can see it right here. We came up and tapped this bottom pretty nicely, came back down, and now it looks like we're getting heavy. I do think the draw on liquidity is to the downside. There wasn't much of a 2022 model here. Again, I would have liked it. I think if Powell wasn't speaking, if it was another day, we could have saw the market come up, take these highs, and then displace slower. And that probably would have opened up a 2022 model. Again, I'm watching, so remember on NASDAQ in the beginning of this video, I talked about, I'm sorry if it's hard to see, the bottom left here. We had this low in the London session that swept that daily and weekly liquidity and came up. NASDAQ seems to be respecting a lot of its bullish PD arrays, and also the fact that it came below these lows right here but didn't close below them, that's a little concerning for me, especially since ES didn't come below those lows. And then again, like I said, ES not being able to make this high that NASDAQ made a higher high right here. And then when they turned around, ES wasn't heavier than NASDAQ. So it should have been weaker. If it couldn't make that high, it should have displaced to the downside more than NASDAQ. But NASDAQ did displace more and was able to take out those lows. And NASDAQ does, it's known for moving. It whipsaws a little more, but these are things. And then when you consider, again, the Fed chair speaking at 12, it's kind of things where it's like the market isn't doing what I expected it to do. So let's take that into consideration on whether you want to take a trade or not, because if you want to take a trade, you want to make sure that everything's playing out as you expected. For example, another example is, so when we saw this 15-minute close below this 15-minute fair value gap, and then we saw right here on this 1-minute candle, when it was printing on the 15-minute, it came up and it touched the bottom side of that wick, which is this low right here. See how it reacted? It displaced a lot, and then the next candle displaced a lot. I would have preferred to see it at least come down to the consequent encroachment of this wick. but it's coming back up and playing in this area again. And it can come down lower again. Like, I think it's still, the draw is still down, but I wouldn't have expected it to come up and take out this high, this swing high. I wouldn't have expected it to come back up to that. I would have expected that to be the high, and then we displace lower to at least some kind of inefficiency. I'm watching how we came up and we wicked into this up close candle. I'd like this up close candle to be thought of as a bullish order block if we do, a bearish order block if we do want to send prices lower. You can see it was a change in the state of delivery, so it's down. It's not the prettiest, but it came down, changed the state of delivery, came down, broke a low. We wicked right up to a quarter of it. Again, the dollar looks like it's going for a lower low possibly. Again, so things aren't super clear. We could have, if you could find somebody out there that's, say, who would have taken, a short off this and maybe got, 5 handles or something. But in my opinion, that would have been pretty lucky. And even if you look at the 5 minute, there's nothing too obvious on the 5 minute. There's nothing on this 5 minute that like everyone who uses these concepts should have seen. I think the only trade somebody could have taken is if they were entering on these highs, assuming they were entering on the Judas swing that was taking all this buy side. But there wasn't much of an entry, after we shifted. And we had the shift here coming below these lows. But it's not even like it came up and like respected this fair value gap and then went lower. It came up above, taking out another swing high. And like you could argue, yeah, if you had your stop up here, you wouldn't have been stopped out. But in my opinion, this should have taken out that high. But you can see on this order block, this 5 minute, all the bodies of these 5 minute candles are respecting its mean threshold. This 8:30 news driver wick does kind of throw off, your attention towards this, but you can ignore that. I've heard ICT, I think, in that explicit scenario, be like, again, the wicks do the damage. So if the body closed below this down close candle, that would be something else. The fact that the 5 minute candles respected this mean threshold so well makes me not want to take any type of short, especially since the dollar looks like it's going to make a lower low. If anything, I think a lot like a scalp to the upside would be more justified. It would probably be sloppy. Look how sloppy this delivery is. It's a barcode. Okay, so we're in the 10 o'clock hour. Look at NASDAQ. NASDAQ set up these equal lows right here. If you look at the NASDAQ 5 minute too, had this fair value gap. And the bodies seem to be respecting the consequent encroachment. This one might. We'll see how this one pans out. So if we did have a body close below mean threshold on this 5 minute, that would be further downside would be definitely in play. Closing below mean threshold of an order block is very not good. We have the dollar going a little higher. It would have to take out this high for it to be, change the trend. But it's making an attempt there. I'm going to go over to the dollar real quick. See if it's turning around at any significant level. So it did drop a little lower into that daily fair value gap. Remember, okay, so it does look like it's turning around at a good level. The consequent encroachment of this wick, you can see, came down. Looks like it tapped it almost perfectly. And now it's going up. So that makes me think, when we're looking at the dollar on the 1 minute in the background here, just to pay attention that this low is bouncing off a significant level. So if we start to make higher highs on the dollar, that's something that's good information to have. We made a significant low. We turned around, we made a low at a significant point, and now we're making bullish structure. You can see we came down, wicked into the consequent encroachment, and consequent encroachment of wicks are PD arrays. And I'm curious to see how this 5-minute candle closes. I think if this 5-minute candle still respects this mean threshold, maybe these highs would be taken out afterwards, because we visited an inefficiency. Yeah. But I still don't think there's anything really in here. Okay, so we had this 5-minute candle close below the mean threshold. It's not enough for me to want to try and go short. I think on another day, that might be a decent entry. But you can see here, look, we made this low, taking out this low. NASDAQ didn't make that low. And, you know, it could go 5 handles off of this area right here. It could. It could not. If NASDAQ had made a lower low with ES, I think this fair value gap could have held price down. But since we saw a little bit of an SMT right here, that also lined up with the consequent encroachment of this wick, that makes me think we were reaching down here just to fill in an inefficiency. That's why we came down here. And then you did have the 5-minute body close below mean threshold, but again, today has been looking really sloppy from the start. So if we're having a sloppy day from the start, you know, this closing below mean threshold is, I don't want to say expected, but we're not surprised that more slot, like if it was to turn around and take out these highs, it's like, oh, well, close below mean threshold. Well, it's been sloppy all morning, so. I think the best possible thing would actually be scalping along if this candle closes in this fair value gap. But it's just, nothing's really acting like it should, in my personal opinion. I mean, you'd have to be able to trade this in the morning. You either, if you came in, you know, starting your day at 9:30, you would have either had to have entered at this high, and if you didn't enter at this high, look at this chop we're in right now. You would have had to have had some theory that you could have entered, you could have entered here just because it took took out a swing high. But the odds of you, whenever you see it in a range like this, like the odds of you entering at one end of the range and then exiting at the other are kind of gambling. Okay, so ES right now is printing lower lows on the 1 minute. NASDAQ has candle bodies closing at higher highs. I wonder if NASDAQ will take this low. I'm looking at the dollar. Yeah, I don't think the market's really tradable until on the 15-minute, unless we get below this 15-minute low or this 15-minute high, I don't think anything is gonna be worth any kind of high probability. Oh wow. We had NASDAQ, this huge bullish candle. Huge, but relatively huge for what we've been seeing. Taking out these swing highs. ES did not. ES did not. NASDAQ looks like it wants to make a high of the day. I think if it does that, ES might have a chance at taking these equal highs we talked about earlier. NASDAQ will probably shoot above them. Whoa. That could have been it. I missed it for a second. Out of everything I've seen, you have the dollar going a little lower, wasn't able to go above these highs. NASDAQ's making higher high, even SMT divergence, that little entry right there. We're finally above this fair value gap on the 15 minute again. Tapped into consequent encroachment. I wouldn't want to take it if we even came back down to it though, because I think it should go higher. It shouldn't even revisit it. If it came back down, I wouldn't want that. What's NASDAQ doing? And because if you entered there, your stop would have to be like right here. Dollar's turning around. Looks like it might want to try and take these highs. I like that. If the dollar gets above these, it's definitely some more downside in play. Again, because this low on the dollar right here was right at that consequent encroachment of that wick for the daily. Let's see if NASDAQ's making lower lows. NASDAQ is still not making lower lows. If we don't continue, this would probably be some seek and destroy shit. Because look, we came down, took liquidity once, twice, 3 times, came back up, took buy side, came back down, took these lows again. It is literally just whipsawing back and forth. If the dollar showed more of a willingness to take these highs, I'd be saying we should be entering right here. I don't think this is super tradable price action. So don't think you need to understand it. I mean, even let's say that you're just taking fair value gaps, any fair value gap for the silver bullet, based off of like the concrete rules. If you tried to enter short going here, you would have you wouldn't have gotten 5 handles, because in theory you would have entered at the bottom of this fair value gap. If I can, let's measure out. You would have got 4 handles if you tried to go short off this fair value gap. If you came back up, if you used it as an inversion, you could have got 5, but just barely. Coming back down, if you use that same fair value gap again, and right here we could have got 5. So that would be assuming that you would have gone long here and short here. But after seeing all of this, there's nothing in all of this that is gonna really make you be like, oh, this is the draw of liquidity. Like, this is where it wants to go. Maybe on NASDAQ it was a little clearer. I don't know. Yeah, so we've entered a fair value gap like 3 times so far. And the 2 times that would have delivered 5 handles were not even, they were not blatantly obvious. It's really interesting. So I'm actually curious to see how this plays out. You can see these 3 lows on NASDAQ. Each one is higher. Whereas these same 3 lows on ES, each one's lower. So I'm curious to see. I think I'll only stay on until 11, but I am curious to see how it plays out. I think they'll probably end up bending to whatever the dollar does. So similar to what I said on the 15-minute, I don't think anything would be really tradable until we either took out this 15-minute low or this 15-minute high. And on the dollar, I don't think anything will be super tradable until we take out either this low or this high. Which is also a 5-minute. If the dollar went lower, if it came back and visited this low, scenario I could see playing out would be if we drop into this blue zone, probably come to about consequent encroachment, which is going to be taking out the liquidity right here on this low, and then it run for these smooth highs up here. That's assuming the dollar's going down and we just wick below these in reverse. And that would make sense as to why NASDAQ is so resistant to make any of these lower lows. NASDAQ would also be running. Yeah, so in hindsight, it's a little more clear. When we came up and revisited this opening range gap, we were also taking out a swing high in the 5-minute, visited the opening range gap, displaced lower. Then you could make the argument that now we were targeting this sell side liquidity the whole time, and once it came up and took out this 5-minute swing high, revisited the opening range gap, then displaced. This was fair to enter on. But that happened after seeing all of this. And basically at this point, once I saw ES make this low and NASDAQ didn't make this low, I was kind of just like, I don't know. I'm out of sync with what is happening right now. Okay. So this was a fair enough silver bullet for this session. I think that's something that some people could have entered on. Like they could have identified what I just played out. Would have delivered about almost 10 handles, probably going to be 10. Now that NASDAQ is closing, now that we have both ES and NASDAQ closing below these lows, yeah, see. We do have somewhat of a breaker on the 15-minute. High, low, higher, high. This high took out buy side. Dollar. Looks like it wants to go higher. The next sell side is right there. I'd be cautious of mean threshold of that. I mean, consequent encroachment of that wick. I like this draw of liquidity. I mean, it's kind of obvious now, but I'm trying to think of what would happen, what would need to occur for me to be interested in trying to take a short here. I think we all, the move, we definitely started. I think what I just said earlier, this definitely was the entry point for this move. After taking that 5 minute, we took the 5 minute swing high, revisited the opening range gap, displaced lower. NASDAQ was still making a higher low when that happened, so that's why I was kind of like, I'm not interested. But as soon as NASDAQ broke, NASDAQ and ES together did the same thing. They broke below all these lows. Now I'm a little more interested. But, it didn't happen until after this move. We have a 5 minute gap on, we have a 5 minute fair value gap. We have a 1 minute fair value gap. We have this 15-minute breaker. I was gonna say, you could try to go short right at the bottom of this breaker, so it would also be because it lines up with the fair value gap. So that right there, that could have been an entry. We're in the fair value gap. It's the bottom of a breaker. The dollar, it's not too convincing. If we do want to see the sell side, I'll do it. We'll go there. Our stop will be right up here. So that stop is the candle that makes this fair value gap. It's above it. It's above mean threshold of the breaker. We're entering on a fair value gap that lines up with the bottom of a breaker. It's also a 5 minute fair value gap. We have the 15-minute breaker structure with the 15-minute candle coming and touching it. I want to see price disregard this BISI. I want to see it just come close. I like that the dollar is making an attempt to come up to these highs. Not what I wanted. NASDAQ. Gonna go over to NASDAQ real quick. I want to see what's happening on the NASDAQ higher time frame structure. Okay. Gonna move this to break even just because with how this morning opened, I'd be happy with just getting the entry and then delivery. That's all I really want. I want the entry and then the immediate delivery. With how sloppy price acted in the morning, I don't want to risk any type of Like, I don't want it to come back into this fair value gap, and we already didn't get the best fill. We didn't get it immediately. I don't want it to come back into this fair value gap and then us have this whole debate on whether it's gonna, how is it respecting it? How is it respecting it? I only want to be in this trade if price really wants to get down here. And if price really wants to get down here, I don't think it'll revisit this fair value gap. I mean, well, it could, you know, it could come up, could revisit it, then it could go lower. But with the conditions of today, I think what we're in right now is good enough. You know, we got something. Watching how the dollar's making this lower low. You're not, it's not wanting to go higher. What I was really hoping is when we saw this turnaround right here, this little tick up, I was hoping it would continue and ride that up. Came down to the low of that fair value gap. Again, if we get stopped out, I'll be fine. We tried a little something. I don't want to really put on risk after watching this morning, knowing Powell's talking at 12. Mm-hmm. It wasn't too shocking just because, you know, the delivery for everything hasn't been clean delivery. And the dollar still melting. Let's see. We don't have the 1050 macro. I know one of the friends that watches gave a good piece of advice to wait until 1050 macro, which I haven't been doing. Yeah, look at it. Came up. That was a higher high on NASDAQ. Yeah, I think this sell side is probable, looking at the 15. But the way it gets there might not be the prettiest. Might wait on the dollar to take these highs before it takes that sell side. Five minute is looking good for sell side. You can see the bodies respected this SIBI. We have the new 15-minute candle open. Curious if it will run up into this for value gap one more time to satisfy this 15-minute for value gap. If it did that and the dollar was making the highs, I would re-enter. Maybe it'll do it. Maybe we'll do it the 1050 macro. Got a minute. We have a minute. Yeah, I'd like to see it come up, hit that fair value gap on the 15-minute. Kind of just turn into a wick above these highs. Then maybe it'll decide to go for that sell side. Dollar is creeping up. It's 10:50. See if it wants to run. Maybe it'll just run for it. And that's how both those 5-minute candles came up to the consequent encroachment of the wicks. Part of me wants to go short again and actually commit a little more, put the stop above here. But it's like, did we run out down here just to shake out liquidity from that consolidation? It wicked above. It went in, it went in, went in. But the dollar's not looking like it wants to go higher. Well, it looks like it wants to go higher. It's just not doing it yet. Did it. I'd want to see it run now after going into the 15-minute fair value gap, tapping the breaker for a second time, going above these two highs. I'd want to see it go now. During the 1050 macro. Dollar finally going for it. Yeah, there we go. Well, if we entered on that retest, we would have got 5 handles, but I probably would have been a little greedy and would have wanted that sell side. Trying to do this, sometimes it just never initiates. It's still looking good. These bodies closed in this fair value gap. The dollar did take that high. Yeah, it just looks like some high resistance liquidity runs. I think it wants it though. I'm surprised after tapping in to this 15-minute SIBI for this and touching the breaker for the second time right here. I'm surprised it didn't just run for it. I really thought that was going to happen, especially after seeing these two candles. But it just shows that today's high resistance, I think it will get to there, but it's not going to get there in the prettiest way. That's another reason why when we entered that trade, I just moved the stop to break even immediately, because I either wanted it to be a low resistance liquidity run or nothing. But we would have gotten 5 handles if we entered the second time. I almost did. We would have got 5 handles if we entered off here, coming down. We're below. We closed on the 15-minute below this fair value gap. We're coming up, touching it again on the 15-minute. Same on the 5-minute. Have the fair value gap. We closed below it, and we're just wicking into it. The dollar did come and take out that high right there, but it didn't want to follow through. So I'm guessing that's why. If the dollar followed through on this high, this sell side would have been visited immediately, but dollar's kind of retracing. I'm really curious. I want to see if we decide to go above this fair value gap, or if we take this sell side. You know, this is what makes trading so hard, is it can do what you planned out. You know, if our plan is to enter on this fair value gap with the expectation of it delivering to the sell side, you can be right and it can do that, but it can do it in different ways that will shake you out as a trader. For example, doing this. But again, remember the bias for the day is bearish. Finally left this daily fair value gap. We took out this swing low. Now we're printing down. Today should be the day that we close below this low. If we had an insane rally that came up and then the body doesn't close below this low, that would bearish bias would not be locked in. Dollar seems to be going a little lower. It's going lower. Getting an up close candle. See what the NASDAQ 1 minute's doing. Yeah, I really want to see. I don't know how long I'll wait for it. I'm just waiting to see if we violate this fair value gap or if we take the sell side. Dollar is falling decent amount on the 1 minute. Wow. Wow. No profit, dude. I'm trading with no wicks, bodies only. I can see that helping a lot, yeah. I personally would want to keep the wicks on just because I feel like they do help tell a story of liquidity, but the body closes are definitely something to pay attention to even more. Okay, I'll be logging off. Yeah, of course. Appreciate you watching. feel like it's hard for me because a lot of the, like, my trading style, I like to be a lot more picky, and ever since I started live streaming, it's been hard because I feel like when I come on and do this, I should deliver something and like make a trade. And I know the account kind of got off on a losing streak just because it was the first time I ever streamed myself trading live, and I was like forcing trades that normally if I wasn't live streaming I wouldn't even be in. And I had to like reel that back. It took a few days off, but now whenever I just watch price and I'm not actually trading, like if I go, like I'll be on here for like 2 hours and won't take a trade, and I'll have like 1 or 2 people watching me, and I just feel bad the whole time. But I'm also trying, I feel like there's a lot of traders out there that they'll be like, I took 2 trades, or they'll be like, I took 2 trades this month. And, once you know exactly what you're looking for, and when it's really everything just lines up perfectly, then you can put some leverage behind, like some real leverage behind it. And like, that's how you eat. And it's kind of breaking away from this like day trading is trading every day mindset. And that's what helped me become more profitable. And live streaming myself kind of made me take a few steps back because I was not being super, super selective. Yeah, with that WAR word. But it's interesting, I like the perspective of, if you're trying to make it through now, one of the most difficult times in the markets, as long as the market's around, 10 years from now, and now is the most difficult time, then it's only going to get easier for you. But I do remember when I first started trading a few years ago, looking back on it, it was like the daily trend was so obvious. It was like, we're trending up for a few days, we'll trend down for a pullback, and we'll trend up. If you look at the daily now, it's like especially this little consolidation. When Tesla was running all the time, every day, all you had to do was buy Tesla call options. Yeah, I feel like a lot of us started around that time. I feel like that's how it goes with like every generation, every few years. There's always like some large catalyst that gets a lot of people interested. And now it's just, who makes it through when it gets tough. Because this shit is tough. And then it's always good to reflect on like where you were like 6 months ago. Like when I started doing the live streaming, I started looking at other, like I never watched live streamers on YouTube. So when I started this channel, I was looking to see what other people do on live streams. And, there'd be times where I'd kind of get a little bit of imposter syndrome. But then I realized like half of these people aren't even like showing like executions. They're just like, they'll be like going long here. And then like they won't tell you when you get out, or like you don't see their executions. You don't see their like P&L live. It's like a bunch of people like all over like stock Twitter that they'll like outline a bunch of shit and then tweet about it in hindsight, or they'll like post their trades. And it's like, yeah, I've had some like bitchin' ass trades that like I could post. Like I could post my executions in hindsight, but like you don't see, like if they post the winning, like they'll post their winning trade like once every 3 days. Well, like, what happened in between all that? Like, people don't know. Okay, so seeing how NASDAQ made this low, ES was not able to make it again. Like, I think it'll melt its way down to this this sell side right here eventually. I don't think I will be a participant in that. Good journaling day though. Today's a good day to journal. Just because, we saw price respect the PD arrays we had outlined. It just didn't get there smoothly. So it's a high resistance liquidity day, and it's just interesting to see, because like this is when your psyche gets messed up. I mean, you could see it. I took that trade right here and then moved my stop to break even immediately. If I didn't do that, if I didn't move my stop to break even immediately, I could have got 5 handles. So it's interesting day to journal, and these are good days to kind of look back on and remember, because when days like this happen again, and it's a high resistance day because we had the sloppy open, and it's a high resistance day, when you journal these days and when they come again, you can remind yourself and kind of reinforce in your memory, like, okay, like, don't second guess my trade. Like, let's enter at the right level that isn't risky. Let's be patient. Let's wait. We might even have to accept a little bit of drawdown, but it's good. NASDAQ is continuing lower. ES isn't. So, I mean, that's just kind of, it'll probably get there. It's just goes to show how today isn't the best day. And every day can't be the best day. I think that's another breaking away from that mindset where like you had to find or make a trade every day, I think is really what's successful, because that's so, like, you don't need that to be profitable. So like there's like, I don't know what the number is. I don't even know if I could guess it, but like there's so many traders that are profitable and make a lot of money, and they can walk into a day and be like, I don't know what the hell is going on, but it's the fact that they don't do anything and they don't act when they don't know what's going on that makes them successful. Yeah, patience and discipline. And it's like, and the thing about those two things is it's so easy to say, like, everybody knows it and you can like listen to a bunch of people say it, but it's so hard to act. It's so hard. And you can even say it in your mind and then like completely not do it. I completely agree with that. Every time I've burned myself, um, I that's when I like become more disciplined. It's every time I burn myself, and it sucks because sometimes when you do burn yourself, it's so defeating. Like thankfully I'm not at the point, like, I don't blow accounts anymore. But that wasn't too long ago, and it was kind of like so mentally and morally defeating, and it's like that's the shit that makes people quit for good. And if you can pick yourself up and just drag yourself through it a little longer and get that confidence back, you'll be more disciplined. But it's even tough, so I'll go over the account. So we took this is today. We took one trade and I moved it to break even, and we got stopped out immediately. It was, for anybody who wasn't here when we did it, I entered right here. I did a market order when I saw it tap this breaker and bounce off. So it would have been better if I had a limit order right up there, but we got a bad fill, and then I saw us come down. And what I really wanted to see, once we closed below this fair value, this BISI right here, we closed below it. I was like, I don't want to see it return back to this level at all. I wanted it to be a low resistance liquidity run, so I moved my stop to break even immediately, and we got bounced out. I mean, the real place to put your stop would be above this candle. I just didn't want to take on that risk, even though, you know, if I did, we would have got our 5 handles, and, you know, that's a story that I've been kind of shooting myself in the foot with a lot. Like I moved my stop up too quickly, and if I didn't, we would have got our 5 handles. But after watching the morning and now even seeing like this, I'm glad that we moved the stop, because it could have easily like ran up against us even more and then went to this liquidity. And the fact that we're still kind of coming out of that drawdown. So we started the account at 150, and, you know, it was my first time ever live streaming myself trade, so that presented a little bit of a hiccup. We haven't really had any solid wins or losses. We had, you know, this win, and everything else was just kind of like exiting trades that I didn't think were good anymore, and we just happened to be green. And, you know, the same thing happens in the red. We had a losing day yesterday. And the thing about yesterday is, so this day, if you go back and watch yesterday's live stream, I traded really sloppily. It was really haphazardly. I got on late, and I just took like the first fair value gap. And while the loss was a normal size loss, I was like really bothered by it the whole day. And at one point, so I have my journal up here, and I'll share that with you for a second, because in the morning I traded my other account. And so this is my journal. In the morning I traded my other account, and we got a good, like a respectable size win. This wasn't live streamed. This was not on the account that we're doing for the YouTube channel. But I ended the day green, up $400. So these 4 trades were shown on the live stream, and they were done on the YouTube trading account. But I was like so upset about what happened on that live stream, and I like didn't even care about this win, and we ended the day green. And it was just, I was like kind of reflecting back on it, and you just have to like remind yourself that, at least for me, like you have to like remind yourself like what are your emotions, and like where are your negative emotions. Because I was so annoyed by this loss, because like we're trying to get this account at a drawdown, so I've been playing a lot more conservatively. Meanwhile, on my other account, when I'm not live streaming, I'm, you know, trading like I know I can trade, like I normally trade. And I just can't get this to translate over to the YouTube account. And it's not, I keep telling myself, I know it's not a skill thing. You know, I have the skill, because when I'm not live streaming, it's there. It's more like a mental thing with the live streaming. And I think, you know, today was like a little microcosm. It was a good example of, I just rushed the stop to break even. We could have got the 5 handles. And, you know, I can kind of go back and forth and tell myself, oh, well, it was good that you did that, because it was a high resistance day. And, you know, I could say like on another day that could have easily came back, even if you placed your stop up here and hit you. So yeah, I'm still battling through these like kind of these new mental scenarios when I'm live streaming. But I keep telling myself I'm just going to be more selective with my trades and, just keep live streaming and kind of get used to it. I think once I get used to it and a little more comfortable and we finally get this account out of drawdown, I'll get the confidence that I normally have when I'm not live streaming. This account, so the plan, if you don't know, the plan for this account is we're trying to model it after like a funded, the funded account rules. And I think I had to look up some funded accounts. We started it at 150, and the only place that does 150 I learned was Top Step. So their max drawdown I think is like $4,500. So we didn't even come, we got like halfway there. We didn't come close, but this is still more drawdown than I expected us to get in. And I just want to provide like a realistic view of what like it looks like for people who are just starting. When I don't live stream myself, I might take like 2 or 3 contracts. I'll use more contracts, but I want this account to kind of emphasize more on like how people should focus on their models, and not trying to get like lottery wins by just like getting lucky because you put 3 contracts on and that happened to be the trade that went in your way. So there's my little soapbox monologue. Appreciate you, no profit dude. I'm gonna log off. I'll be back on in the afternoon. Hopefully the price action is a little less high resistance since Powell will be done speaking. Enjoy the rest of your day.